You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
I built a logistics business starting from the city of Abuja, from being a third-party logistics partner to becoming a logistics financing company. Africa has a lot of great talent, but having a leader that is able to discern good talent from bad talent is also critical. We do understand that the international community is more active when it comes to investing than some local players here. Just us supporting these kind of businesses, we're expanding the expertise and talent pool available on the continent.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to another episode of the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we explore the ideas, innovations, and strategies unlocking Africa's economic potential. When people think about entrepreneurship in Africa, the conversation is usually dominated by startup funding rounds, unicorn valuations, and venture capital. Yet, behind those headlines sits a very different reality. Across the continent are thousands of businesses that have proven customers want what they're selling. They're generating revenue, creating jobs, and solving real problems, but they're stuck. Too mature for accelerators, too early for institutional investors, too complex for one-size-fits-all support. Some people call it the messy middle. Amanda Etuk believes it's actually one of Africa's greatest untapped economic opportunities. As Program Director of Cascador, she works with growth stage entrepreneurs, helping them develop not only access to capital, but the leadership, networks, and operational capability needed to build resilient companies. Amanda, welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast. How are you?
I'm awesome. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. As always, I like to start from the beginning, just to have a bit of understanding of who you are, your journey, where you came from to get to where you are now. So please give us an introduction into who Amanda is.
Amanda Etuk is an entrepreneur turned entrepreneur. I actually got introduced to the Cascador program after being an entrepreneur myself. I built a logistics business starting from the city of Abuja, from being a third-party logistics partner to becoming a logistics financing company. It was in this journey, the thick of things, that I got introduced to Cascador. Very interesting story. I was a participant there myself. I was an entrepreneur getting into the program, and it was during the program that my co-founder and I made the very difficult decision to shut down our business.
Oh.
That's essentially my origin story with Cascador, and being on the other side of the table, speaking to founders and supporting other entrepreneurs in this market. So that's how my journey came to be. I had 7 years of building the messenger out from the city of Abuja. Our target was underserved regions of Nigeria, equipping e-commerce businesses, FMCG businesses with the right logistics support, and then moving on to supporting gig workers have the right logistics equipment to serve their customers. It was just a very interesting time for us, a lot of learnings and seeing how that industry moved from being, I think, mostly owner managed to then being a full-time gig economy sector where most logistics providers, are gig workers. Very different from what it was when we started. So that's one of the painful, I think, growth issues that we had to go through to get the sector where it is now today. So at Cascador, I am the program director, and my role is really supporting and managing the programs. That's the educational aspect, the leadership development, and what we have to provide to scale up startups, or people what we call the real economy businesses, getting them ready to become institutional businesses, enduring businesses. So my role involves the recruitment, the selection, really the support that these entrepreneurs need to get from where they are today to where they envision scale to be for their companies.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Amanda. I know you mentioned in terms of working with, gig workers, so people maybe at the early stages of their entrepreneurial journey who are kind of building or ready to scale. But when people tend to discuss African entrepreneurial ecosystem, a lot of times the focus is on startups raising capital or companies scaling and becoming unicorns. Why do you feel or think growth stage businesses receive so little attention within the African startup space?
Honestly, that's what I'll call the messy middle. It's the most difficult aspect, is where you're a bit too large for early stage VC funds, and then you're too small for institutional TFI or even commercial capital. So you're almost stuck in this valley of nowhere.
Yes.
It's where the business has, obviously gotten some product market fit, some traction with customers, but really needs the support to go to the next level. It's usually the most difficult part of a business to fund, because what they need is not just capital. There is an operational skill that needs to be added to the business. The business has become more complex. So pouring or pushing capital that business is not to that business, it's not the only solution. Here, you have to think about the strategy. You have to think about the financial operations. You have to think about the talent that's actually working in those businesses. It's a very critical time where it has been mostly founder-led.
Yes.
And then the founder is doing multiple roles, multiple things, actually working in the business, getting them to a point where they are now leaders managing specialized talent within their organization. So it's a very tricky time to support, and it's really where a lot of businesses die. We have the statistics of how many years businesses get to before they wilter and die, and it's usually at that critical point where they need to scale, and then they're no more a startup or an early stage business where they can get a lot of the support that is readily available.
You used the phrase messy middle. Why do you believe so many promising businesses get trapped in this messy middle?
Because the infrastructure that supported them to get the early traction disappears. It's very easy to raise equity for an idea. And then when it's no longer an idea, when obviously there's some traction, the expectations are very different. And in this market, it's even harder because businesses at that stage need infrastructure, policy support. There are things that are no longer the soft skills or the intangibles, the actual investment, capex, opex that have to be made into the business at that point. So again, it's where investors are looking for traction. They're looking for returns at that stage. And we've seen that a lot of, African businesses still need a bit more support in being able to guarantee those returns to investors who are no longer looking at them as early stage or idea businesses. The capital they need is not exactly equity. It might not even be institutional or commercial debt. It's because they are still at that stage where nothing is really guaranteed. They do have the traction in terms of customers, but the revenue and getting to scale is still shaky. So I call it the messy middle because of all those factors.
I guess what's interesting is that these aren't businesses that are still searching for ideas. They've already proven customers want their products. So from the entrepreneurs you've worked with, what would you say is probably the biggest obstacle once a company has achieved that product market fit?
What I've seen, because coincidentally you were in the process of interviewing companies for our next cohort, is that the talent needed to go from 100 to 1,000 is different from where you need to go from 0 to 100.
Yes.
And for 0 to 100, you could be scrappy, you could have some luck in the market, but then getting those customers to stay, it might sound very trivial, but a lot of people are not even able to properly articulate what their value proposition is in the market, especially here in Africa, where we do have a lot of people solving the same sort of problems. So you find that there is a lack of differentiation in most businesses. They haven't really found the exact lever as to what is really driving revenues here. You find businesses launching one idea, have different revenue streams, but are unable to say what is the customer willing to pay for.
Yes.
And there's a strategy gap or even a leadership gap within the organizations. And it's not just about pushing to 1,000 customers, getting 1,000 users. What are people really paying for, and not just paying for once, what are they willing to continue to pay for? What is valuable to the customer? What is valuable in this market? Because another thing that was really popular in the early days, you see founders saying the X for Africa, the Spotify for Africa, the Amazon for Africa. So there was a lot of people importing business models. And then you find that what are people really in this market paying for? It becomes more pertinent to determine what people will pay for, what they will pay for repeatedly, and what will guarantee consistent recurring revenue as a business scales.
I guess until you figure out what people are paying for and what they will pay for consistently, you can't get stuck in that trap of not being able to generate enough revenue to scale. So many founders might believe that raising more capital will solve their problems. In your experience, what challenges would you say money cannot fix?
Ooh, money can't fix bad hiring. Money can't fix bad hiring. You laughed at this, so I think you have experience with that. Money can't fix bad hiring. That's one. Money can't fix discernment. Money can't fix a lack of strategy. One of the things that we've seen is sometimes a lot of companies are trying on different opportunities that might be a distraction to the business. People make jokes like, oh, there's a gap in the market, but then when you get into it, then you realize there's no market in the gap. So a lot of ideas have been untested. They're not being validated properly. There's not a lot of customer research that's being pushed behind a lot of things. So a customer might say, oh, yes, if you guys had this feature, or if you guys did this, I would pay for it. And then you find that companies who have raised a lot of capital then push that capital behind this idea or this opportunity that a client or a company has floated to them. And realistically, after burning thousands of dollars, they find that there's actually no opportunity there. Or it's more what we've also seen in certain sectors is where maybe bigger players are pushing some of their capital needs to smaller startups. So it seems like a lot of volume transactions. But when you start to look at it, is there any real margin being made there? Is there any real revenue? So there's always also the draw of working for a large player who's bringing volumes and volumes or a lot of business to you. And you feel like, oh, I think I have this customer on my books. I really, that's a loss-making endeavor. So we find a lot of businesses at this mid stage falling into the trap of that.
You touched on something quite important in terms of money can't fix bad hiring, and hiring is obviously required to scale. So have you noticed that the skills required to build a business are extremely different from the skills required to scale a business?
Oh, yes, definitely. And then we have to also take this back to the founder determining what actual skills and talent the business needs at that time. So a lot of hiring might also just be a misplaced or an ill-described gap within the company. A lot of people might be hiring for product or hiring for growth, but what they might need might be a closer look at the margins and the numbers, or a better understanding of the revenue or the customer. So those skills are, I would say that Africa has a lot of great talent, but even having a leader that is able to discern good talent from bad talent is also critical. You could hire the most accomplished person who looks great on paper, but might not be the exact fit for what the company needs to go to the next stage. So I wouldn't necessarily put all the blame on the talent, because sometimes it's putting a square peg in a round hole. You need to know, what does this business need? Is there contextual understanding, or if not even contextual or understanding of that sector? Is there something that has been done before that can be brought in here? And we've obviously seen situations where people outside of the sector are actually able to make great change within the company by thinking outside of the box. But it's still the onus of the leader to really determine what the business needs per time. And it still goes back to having clarity about the business, having clarity about the offerings or the value proposition of the business. That would then guide everything from the hiring to the strategy and the decisions that need to be made. And a lot of founders are growing into that leadership position where they need exposure. They need senior talents, people who have done this before, people who are able to look deep into the market and the sector and even the country itself and say, oh, this is who I think can work for you. And I'm mentioning this particularly because it's the gap that Cascador fills. We support our growth stage companies with the leadership, the networks, and the support that they need. And sometimes that also comes with looking at the hiring decisions being made by the company. As I mentioned, it's one of the most critical flaws. You hire someone who is, a generalist when you're starting out, and as you grow, maybe especially in finance, that's so big here in Nigeria, financing company, you then need someone who actually understands the core finances or speaks the language of revenue generation within the company. So bad hiring, it's something that it can be eradicated. You can teach how people can discern better what they need for their business. And we found that we've been able to support our growth stage companies with that.
So would you say leadership development is a central part of Cascador's philosophy?
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So we found that a lot of people or a lot of companies who are similar to us would de-risk the investment. And we found that one of the most impactful or successful ways of de-risking a business is actually building the leadership capability within the founder itself. So if you have a better leader as a founder, if you have a better, more equipped C-suite or a founding team, then you've almost you've solved one major problem within the organization. If that founder is able to then articulate the vision to investors, articulate the vision to even getting the right team on board, then we've succeeded at something. So leadership development, we've seen, is very critical to moving the needle with businesses in Africa.
Okay, so I guess without naming any names, is there an example where, say, a founder's mindset or leadership became the biggest unlock for the business growth?
Oh, yes. One of the most recent, like in our recent cohort, what was a game changer was working with a certain female founder who we went on to invest with. And then what I would say that was a game changer was getting her to understand her business in a very crowded market, finding out what was different about her. And not just what was different about her and the business, having the skills, having the insights to look at her business critically, to see what the gaps were. It was such a huge difference for her in how she then went on to engage other investors, other partners, because she was able to present her company in a different light. After that, she was able to recruit more senior leaders, selling her vision entirely, getting people on board, leaving established brands to come work at this startup. So that was something that we did. Again, helping this leader be the sort of leader that experienced people, higher talent would want to follow. We found that was a strategic lever for us, and it has helped the founder unlock more opportunities for themselves and be able to hire better talent, being able to raise money on larger stages. So I would say that leadership lever, unlocking that, has been very significant for us. One thing that I would do is I wouldn't just talk about it. I would share a real testimonial video from this founder, just so you can see like her growth and her journey through the Cascador program. So it's one of the most rewarding things that I'm doing currently with my life, and just seeing and being part of a team that is supporting in this way, not just with capital. I'm not trying to exclude the importance of capital in growing a business, but the other intangibles are so often overlooked that when you see the transformation that capital support, networks, and then that leadership development, when you see what it brings together, then it's such a beautiful picture, and it's such a great thing to be part of. So watching it happen firsthand, and then having closed the business myself, even though I thought I was a great person, and seeing the gaps there, it's such a rewarding thing. So yes, leadership is critical in growing African businesses.
As we've discussed, leadership is critical, but it is one piece of a big puzzle, I guess. Another area that's critical is who the founder surrounds themselves with. I think one thing I notice among a lot of successful entrepreneurs globally is they rarely build a So how important would you say peer networks, mentors, or I guess being surrounded by experienced operators is for the entrepreneurs or the businesses that you support?
So one of the most popular feedback that we get from our entrepreneurs is, I want to learn from someone who has done this before. I want to learn from someone who has scaled their business internationally and worked across several countries. It's something that we keep hearing from entrepreneurs. So we have a philosophy where we say someone can be a resource multiplier or a capital multiplier. So learning from peer networks or even mentors, it means that the person is willing to take on the knowledge, take on the networks, and then be able to turn it into something productive. Because let's face it, a lot of people are surrounded by great voices, great people around them. We have podcasts like yours where you have very critical sector leaders talk about their experiences. Sometimes it takes a great founder themselves, who we've called a resource multiplier, to be able to take that education, take that network, and turn it into something. So yes, we're able to provide the enabling environment, but it's still very critical to pick the right person to provide the opportunities with, because it's very easy to say, I'm going to provide you with a peer network. I'm going to provide you with all of this. So you can have someone at a banquet that's still starving because they're not able to take advantage of the resources that they have available to them. So yes, it's very critical, but it's still up to the founder to leverage those resources in a way that is productive.
I agree. Of course, no conversation about entrepreneurship is complete without talking about finance. So do you think we've become too dependent when it comes to, say, venture capital as a default solution for entrepreneurship in Africa?
Oh, yes, we have. So definitely we have. There's nothing wrong with venture capital. It's great for certain types of businesses. But one of the gaps that we've then seen with, of course, because this is what is most available, this is what has been glamorized. We have a lot of news moments and virality around how much founders have raised.
Yes.
And what has done is that a lot of founders are then building their businesses for this sort of capital, or positioning their businesses for venture capital, and then there are many other options. So that's something that we're trying to teach the ecosystem at Cascador, not from a position of superiority, but seeing that Africa has a gap, and that gap is not only going to be filled by venture backable companies. A lot of the capital that African businesses need, especially in the real economy, might be concessionary debt, it might be bank guarantees, it might be collateral. We've seen that there's a large working capital gap, especially for businesses that are in what we've called the real economy sectors, manufacturing, agriculture, and the creative industry. It could be a working capital gap rather than a financing need that needs equity contribution. So there are ways that we've encouraged our founders and our entrepreneurs to look creatively to raising capital for their businesses. Yes, VC is very glamorous in this market, and it's what has been available to a lot of people or a lot of businesses. But we push back to say that capital should be designed for the business and not the business designing for the capital that's available. So that's why at Cascador, we consider a mix of instruments. We have been able to support our founders with debt, with equity, technical assistance. A lot of times we've been able to provide technical assistance in terms of advisory support to our founders. I would say that a lot of people are structuring for the capital that's available. And then for us, we are providing different forms of instruments that the business actually needs. So we encourage people to look creatively at capital, creatively at scale. I'll give you an example here for one of our companies who was looking for funding. We encouraged the founder to explore OEM partnerships rather than continuously raise equity or debt for the model that they were pursuing. And we're very pleased to see that this was a structure that actually panned out in reality, rather than raising the debt needed for that phase of the business. So those are some of the things that we encourage people to do. Also, what we were able to do last year that we're incredibly proud of is that we were able to provide a bank guarantee for a DFI-backed loan at a single-digit interest rate. So one of the other things that we've noticed that founders struggle with in this market is debt, or looking for debt, comes with so many economy conditions that realistically businesses at the stage I've described cannot afford or do not have collateral for that. So being able to provide that for our companies, our founders to access capital has been something. So yeah, we believe that venture capital is not the only solution. It's great for certain types of businesses, but founders in this market should be more creative in how they raise funding for their businesses.
You've touched on this, but I was wondering or hoping to probably go into a bit more detail or just to clarify in terms of, do you use a mix or is it catalytic capital alongside debt and equity? So from your perspective or your experience, why would you say matching the right type of capital to the right stage of business is so important?
Oh, we've seen a lot of businesses collapse or even struggle with, for example, foreign denominated debt. We do understand that the international community is more active when it comes to investing than some local players here, and that is a major gap. So we've seen that sometimes getting that dollar debt that is very attractive and easily available puts the founder in a trap where they have to deal with FX evaluations, where they have to deal with their business revenue actually being in naira, and then you have them wanting to pay back in dollars. So that is something that is already a constraint and a bottleneck where the founder can fail. So just having that situation is one example of why we say you should be careful of the instruments that you're using. And then we find that some founders become over diluted because equity, again, is the most available source of funding that they can raise at the time. So if a business needs to expand, have maybe even get some equipment, for example, we don't believe that that's something you raise equity for when you can guarantee maybe the revenue or even the customer. So those are the things that we're trying to teach. Just so, yes, equity has only been available, but we have a new sort of instrument or a new sort of funding that's available to match what we've seen as the actual gap in this market. So yes, catalytic capital is really important. I know that a lot of people shy away from the buzzwords of what catalytic capital looks like. Is it grants? And what does that really mean? What does it mean to be catalytic? It seems like a buzzword. But for us, it's more like we're giving catalytic capital to catalytic founders, really, because we're not constrained to using any instruments. We are able to be patient with in terms of the loan tenor, in terms of having moratorium periods in place, in terms of pricing our debt below market rates in this Nigerian market. So for us, that's catalytic in the sense that we believe that our capital should then crowd in capital for that founder after this stage.
So we know that money helps business to grow, but I think ultimately economies do grow because businesses create jobs. So do you believe supporting growth stage businesses could have a much bigger impact on employment than simply creating just more startups?
Oh yes, we believe that greatly. We've started to say we're supporting real economy businesses. We do support, the grand ideas, the moonshot ideas as well. But where there is an employment gap, even with the startups that have come into the Nigerian and African market, is how many people can those jobs can those companies create jobs or opportunities for? We have a thriving youth population, and we have people leaving school every year and then coming back to the same job market. What kind of companies can create the employment for people in Africa? So it's a major part of what we do. We fund people across the hospitality sector that is creating a lot of early stage jobs. For instance, one of our portfolio companies is Oriki, and for us, even looking through an impact lens, is to say this is creating jobs for people who might start up as beauticians, for example. We're creating jobs in the agricultural sector. We're improving their livelihoods and the impact through, obviously able to earn more through some of the platforms. We're in the healthcare sector. So we're actively supporting companies that can create job opportunities, increased access to decent wages for people. So it's a critical mandate that we have at Cascador.
So I guess from my research and reading, I saw that Cascador has supported more than 70 entrepreneurs who have collectively raised over $125 million. So if you were looking across your portfolio, what characteristics would you say consistently separate the businesses that scale successfully against those that don't?
It's very difficult to say like this is a hard metric of why people would fail or succeed, because the market does play a role in the success of a business. I wouldn't put that all on the founder or the kind of business it is. Some businesses will succeed better in this market than, or even succeed in an international market better than they would here. So I just wanted to take that out of the consideration. But what we've seen though is a company or a founder that really listens to their customer is a major lever for success. Sometimes just that customer pulse, being on the customer pulse, helps the business avoid certain pitfalls or know when to shift or when to pivot to a different model better than any other form of strategy would do. But really understanding the customer and the market is what we've seen that has separated the companies who succeed from those who fail. We've seen also that those who are able to take on the strategy and the insights, a lot of founders talk about data, but we found that not a lot of people are using that data to actually drive decision making within their businesses. People might, try on an idea based on a suggestion rather than testing actually if this works. So that's one of the that has caused a lot of losses for the businesses that we've seen, trying on tested ideas, hiring at scale, not actually knowing what is bringing in the revenue. I know that might sound almost implausible, but if you start to think about a lot of ideas that were pushed out in the early days of this venture, where people were trying growth at all costs, you that not all customers are the best types, and just people who really have a finger on their numbers. Not every founder is going to have deep finance expertise, but just having a grasp of this is what drives revenue for me, this is where we're losing money, and just understanding the mechanics of the cash flow within their business is a way that I've seen that most businesses will stay afloat. We do know that the number one reason why businesses fail, or one of the major reasons, is really running out of cash. So if you don't have an understanding of those numbers, what is driving revenue, then you might not be able to stay in business for very long.
As you mentioned, the data, the numbers are important. I guess ultimately, nothing happens in isolation. Businesses grow within an ecosystem. So if investors, governments, universities, or corporates each changed one thing tomorrow to support scaling businesses, where would you want to see the biggest change?
Oh, I think we have a lot of work to do as an ecosystem, and it's not something that can be done by one player in isolation. We do have to create the right policy and environment for businesses to thrive. We've talked a lot about the real economy businesses, or even manufacturing, for instance, and they are plagued by a lot of infrastructure challenges. Power, access to road networks. So those are things where government has a major role to play. You find that for manufacturers, even in Africa, Nigeria in particular, have energy as one of their highest costs. So let's just picture a scenario where, for instance, energy was not a problem, or maybe consistent energy was something that they could pay for without the high cost of diesel or having to create alternative power. Just imagine how much profitable or more profitable that sector would be if that's sorted out. So again, is having local players in terms of financing coming. We can't always wait for international investors to back our local enterprises. People taking a more, bullish approach to funding businesses within Africa is something that would help this ecosystem as well. Then having programs like ours that focus on the leadership and fixing the gaps within the founder itself, or the business itself, and the internal team, that's also a huge lever for success for these businesses. So it's not just one thing. It's a medley of different solutions targeted at improving, our ecosystem and the business world in general.
So if we kind of look ahead, look to the future, if we were having this conversation, say in 10 years from now, what would success look like for you?
That's almost easy. Again, just having that clarity of what would we like to do in 10 years. In 10 years, it would be such a great thing to say that we have created 250,000 jobs, or even just as a start. Maybe this is less than 10 years. I think in 2030, the vision would be creating over 250,000 jobs through our entrepreneurs, through the founders in our pool, improving 10 million lives. So that's direct and indirect jobs. That's people who are earning better wages because the companies that we've backed exist. These are people who have access to quality medical care because we've backed businesses that are able to provide that. These are, one other thing is having businesses that can be recognized as the institutions within this market, coming from a pool of entrepreneurs that we've backed. I think even in 4 or 5 years from now, that would be success for us. Being able to grow a business beyond the startup phase to becoming an institutional business, and seeing a great number of these businesses being listed, or being able to be large employers of labor, being used as reference points for growth within the African context. That would be a thing of great pride for us.
Fantastic. And I guess going back to your phrase or comment about the messy middle. So how would you see Africa's entrepreneurial ecosystem changing or being different if we finally solved the challenges that occur within the messy middle?
So I think that one of the greatest things that we would see is even an upskilling of the talent. I think one of the issues that I mentioned was not like bad hiring practices, and that's because not a lot of businesses have grown to a certain scale within this market. We have predominantly SMEs, and we have very few world-class institutional businesses. Just us supporting these kind of businesses, we're expanding the expertise and talent pool available on the continent. That's one of the things that us solving this messy middle will create. There are few businesses in Nigeria that I would say are employing over 100,000 people. Being able to move some of the businesses that we have in this messy middle to get to a point where they're huge employers of labor, where they're expanding beyond a particular region or market, for them to now become titans of industry. I think that moving more businesses out of that SME trap is something that would create even a better business environment within Nigeria, and people being able to make long-term investments and bets within this space. We will be creating better returns for investors. One of the things that has been stated over and over again is the lack of exits or the lack of proper returns. And moving the businesses that we have stuck at this point guarantees that almost everyone who was playing within this entrepreneurial support system would win, basically by just being able to fix the place where most of the businesses are stuck.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have, say, quotes, philosophies, proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are good or when times are challenging. Do you have one that has stayed with you throughout your journey?
I think that it might sound very cliche, but for me is be the good you want to see in the world. I think it's such a powerful, maybe will I say, affirmation, because it really pertains to my life and what I'm currently doing now. A lot of the support or the things that I felt like I needed as an entrepreneur, I'm very privileged to now work within an organization that is focused on providing the right type of support to these entrepreneurs. So it guides everything from how we create the curriculum, to the kind of peers that we put in the room, to the kind of mentors that we speak to or we bring into the program, to even the kind of businesses that we support. So that support that I would have benefited from as an entrepreneur, I get to be an active part of creating that every day in my day job. So it's really a mantra that is very important and very crucial to what I do.
Amanda, that has been a very enjoyable and also insightful conversation. I think for me, one part that stands out is that Africa's entrepreneurial challenges aren't simply about creating more startups. It's about helping more businesses make that difficult transition or journey from surviving to scaling. So yeah, thank you for joining us today and sharing your knowledge, expertise, your wisdom. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.